Okay, well, as Philip was saying, we're trying to establish like a nice foundation to go into the approach that when we start to expand the project on Monday, we're going to have a kind of clear understanding of our site and both the physical model and a series of section drawings that we can start to use as a tool for development. You've got the model underway, and the last part of that kind of deliverable is the drawing itself. So what we're looking to do is produce a grid of sections similar to the grid of topographies that you selected from your 6 candidates and then finally your 1. And this is going to be basically, if you almost thought of, you know, your slicing that happened going through for your model. That happened on the axis, in our case, the y-axis, but it was perpendicular, right? So it really didn't talk about what's happening while I'm here as much as it talked about what's happening for me to construct a solid piece. But our sections are actually going to follow the spline itself and be perpendicular to the spline, because we want to actually have a kind of consistent vantage point, and as if our vantage point was tangential to that spline that you drew, right? If we were looking in that direction, then the section would be perpendicular. So we need a series, almost like a series of train track sections to kind of see what the shifts and transitions will be once we start to develop it. In order to do that, we just need to kind of set up our sections a little bit differently. We're going to do 20 of them instead of 60, so we're going to have fewer of them. And the setup for it is 2 templates. There's going to be the Rhino one, which looks like that, and there's also the Illustrator one that looks like that. And you can see that the Rhino one, these 2 drawings are exactly the same thing in both templates, so they're kind of registering out what we're going to do. There's 2 drawings. There's what's going to be our grid of sections that are going to happen in this area, and then there's also going to be the guide that tells us what our sections are. And this guide is the same size as your physical model. It's going to be the same size as your physical model as well. So it's going to be something that you can use as a tool, as a reference. You'll have this kind of guide as to where your sections are, and then I'll align it with your 3-dimensional model. And those are represented here and here as well. So it's not a ton of new geometry. Actually, when it comes to the actual geometry itself, we're not making any geometry. We're documenting what's going on with it. So the things that I need to bring in are the 2 things: my poly surface, like my model that we made last time, and the original spline, the centerline spline that came through. We're going to use that as a reference for our sections. I'm going to go back to that model then, and I'm going to turn those objects on and copy those so I can use them. So I'm going to turn back on my new spline layer so that I've got these 3 objects, and I want to copy those and place those in my template that I've got now. So they're going to come in on the layers that they came in on originally. It's these here. These other layers are already going to be part of the template. They're already going to be established, and we'll just talk about what they mean. But kind of more importantly, you can kind of get a sense of what's going on here. This is sitting at the base still, and we've got these objects here. So what I need to do for my setup is to start to make the first thing I'm going to do is make the actual sections. In order to do that, I'm going to have reference geometry. Sections by default can be going in straight parallel lines to our construction plane, but if we want to do a section in a different direction, we need to create some kind of reference geometry to do it. So in order to do that, I'm going to use this layer here called perp curves, and what's that doing is it's creating a series of curves like this, and this kind of reference curve is what I'm going to be using to draw my sections with the sections tool plugin. So I'll select those objects and get rid of them, and we'll talk about how to make those from scratch. What I want to do is, if I take off my topo poly surface for a second, is I'm going to draw a line that's perpendicular to this curve. And if I go to curve and I go to line, there's an option that says perpendicular from curve. and it asks for the started line. So I'm going to draw it at the beginning of my model, or the beginning of my spline here. And you can see right here, it's just giving me an option as to what direction I want to go in. I'm just going to go down here about that amount. It doesn't matter what the distance is too much because I'm just using it as a reference. So something like that, right? That's a line. And what that's doing is it's establishing a relationship with our sections that says that these two things will always be perpendicular to each other. So now I can make copies of this object, knowing that all the copies will be perpendicular if I use the right tool. And the right tool for that is going to be my array along a curve. So I'm going to array an object along a curve. And what this tool does is it takes the object that's arrayed and repeats its relationship with its copies. So my object to array is going to be this reference curve. My path curve, I want to pick near the base point. So that's going to be where it touches right now, which is right there. And it's going to give me an option as to how many I want. So we want to do 20 sections, but we don't want to cut through the very beginning and the very end of the surfaces because that'll make some of the stuff fall off our model. So I'm going to do 22 to add one extra and one to the end. So this field gets changed to 22. And then for my orientation, it's a freeform orientation. This is a flat drawing, so it'll basically give us that kind of train track look to it. When I hit enter, it gives me that. And I'm going to select the first and the last and just hide them. That way I don't use them by mistake. So when I talk about my section planes, this is kind of what my these are how these things are going to line up. They're divided evenly by length across the whole thing. So this starts as an arbitrary kind of slicing up of the canyon space that we've got to just not say this is exactly where anything is going to happen particularly, but it's almost like a survey. It's just we want to kind of, we've got to do it somehow. This way is as good as any to say. We need to slice this thing to see and start tracking the changes that happen along the way. So I've got these are my perpendicular curves, and then I can use them to actually start drawing my sections themselves. I'm going to change my layer to sections. I'm going to bring back my topo poly surface. So as you remember, we've got these two, and yours might look different, but at some point you're basically going to have two pieces, and you want to make sure that you cut sections through that. So with the section tools, we're not going to do an array of sections because each one of these is in a different direction. We're going to do sections individually. I'm going to go to create, and it's going to ask me to select the object to section, and I'm going to pick these two poly surfaces right here. And press enter. It's going to ask me a couple things. It's going to ask me my direction. It's also going to ask me the start index and things like that. I did a practice one of these, so I already did 20, so my start index is 21. The number's not so important. It's that you kind of keep track of them. So I'm going to change my index back to 1 to be clear about it. The important thing here is that I change the direction. So I'm going to change the direction. It says dir equals x-axis. I'm going to click on that and change it to pick. And once I do that, I've got two endpoints. Let me take off my smart track. I've got one here and one here, and that has given it a new direction. And now it's asking me a couple of other things. The other important one that we want to do is we want to make sure the arrow scale is set to 0.05. It's going to be sent to 0.1, or it's going to be sent to 1.0 by default, so you want to change that to 0.5. In terms of our drawing, we want smaller arrows, so that's why we're doing that. So the last thing I have to do is hit enter to accept the options. Now what that does is that basically just puts my section on this plane. It doesn't place it, it picks the direction, right? So my section could still be anywhere. So it's important that I have this reference curve to say my section is going to be there. And basically what you want to do to make it run smooth is you want to go from left to right with your sections, and you want them all to face the right-hand side. So it might look different here in terms of what direction it's facing. Sometimes it's hard to gauge where it's going to end up. Right now you can see mine are facing right. If they weren't facing right, I can hit this flip option here, and it'll make it face the left, and I can flip it back. So if yours faces left, you can just use this flip option. And then I'm going to place it. So it's going to drop that section in there. And mine's saying 21, so I must have exited it out before I did that option. Let's see what I did wrong. I'll run it one more time, see what I did wrong on there. I probably didn't accept it, change my start index. There we go. So I'll do pick. Place. And yeah, it's doing it, but that's okay. It's just bugging out when it comes to the numbering of it, but it'll work just the same. So that drops this section in there. So my sections, instead of being 1, are going to be 21 to 40. That's one section. I basically am going to have to do this every time. This is the workflow to establish all these sections that come out here. So ways to do that. Remember, we said that you can kind of make this thing go faster by pressing the star before you enter a command. So the command here, when I look into my history, is called stcreate, which is section tools create. I say stcreate. I picks. Right. And then you can see it always resets to direction equals x-axis. It left my arrow scale the same way it was before, which is a good thing, but it does that. It's a sticky option and it's in the plugin. I can't make it not do that every time. So every time I've got to change it. But you'll notice that there's also a underline under the dir there. That's the hotkey for it. So I can also just type D, and then under picking, instead of like clicking here, I can also hit the P on my keyboard and hit enter, right? And that allows me to do the same thing. So I just picked my direction, and now it's asking me where to place this section, and I place this section, and I hit enter. And because I hit that star, it's asking me now, again, it just reruns the command one more time, right? So it's basically saying, well, every time I've got to hit D to change the direction and P to do the pick option. So one thing that I did was I went into my Rhino options and I went to the keyboard and I had an empty spot for F4. So these are where you can put custom commands and things. You can type in a Rhino command, you can type in anything. And what I typed in is D space P space, because that's the same as me hitting D space P space, right? And that's on my F4. So once I hit OK on that, and you could put it on any of those, F4 was open. So now when I go and rerun that command, and I pick my options, instead of having to go through this menu again, I just hit F4 and it jumps to that part. And it goes, and because I have the star in front of it, I've gone right into the next one. So now that I know that I have to do 20 of those, I've saved myself about 80 key presses of this whole process just by doing that. So it took me a couple seconds to set up that thing. The only thing I'm worried about really right now is making sure that my section is going in the right direction, right? So this, instead of clicking in here, I just hit F4, and you can see what it's doing up in my window there. It's typing in D there and typing in P there, and then it's giving me the prompt. This is something I've got to do in my model. There's no other way to get around telling it to do something in your model. So the thing you want to make sure is you have your end snap on. You kind of don't need any other snaps on, so what you can do is you can right click that end snap and make it the only one active. It's a toggle that goes back and forth. Least exciting part of this. But the reason why we go through it is so we've got these three-dimensional sections that are saved to our model, and we can nest out however we like. So let me redraw that one. There we go. And every once in a while, you want to make sure, see, I stopped making sure right here about what direction my section was going. So now a couple of them are going backwards. And that's fine. I can show you how to fix that as well. So I've got like this one, and this one, and a couple other ones are going in the wrong direction. So we can flip those. I think it makes a difference what direction you draw it, like a curve does. So if I draw it from top to bottom, it tends to face in the right direction. If I draw it bottom to top, it goes in the other direction. So just be consistent.
Got a question on here.
Yep.
If your center spline ends up being lateral, then in that case, where do you want your arrows to point, up or down?
There's a direction to it. It should always be going. If you draw it, the flow should always take it this way, right? It has to transverse, so it should never switch directions, right? So like if you drew like tangent arrows on it, those tangent arrows would tell you the direction, right, off of it. If you think of it that way. One way I can show you another way to check it too is once I get out of this command. Hold on. For this, that. Okay. And there's 40. Is every object has a direction to it. So if you lose, you can always click on the spline and look at analyze direction. And like these are the tangent curves I'm talking about. You would always want to go in the direction of this, right? So if this is going this way, this is the direction that I want. This is the same direction that I want all my curves to go in. And this can be flipped too, right? I could flip it to that too, but we want to go this way. So before I nest these things out, so these are basically, just like before, we've got these 3D sections that are hanging out. You can see I've got a new layer right here. And before I do anything though, I want to make sure that these are all facing the right direction. And I've got a couple, when I look at the flags on them, that are going in the other direction. And that's when I can go and edit the actual section itself. And that's under section tools. I can edit the section. So once they're made, I can still go and edit them. And I can select the sections and just take a look at them and flip them. I'm not moving them. It's giving me the option to move them. I don't want to move them. I just want to flip them. So I can say flip, flip, flip. I'll try and do it again. Doesn't want to do that one. Looks like it only wants to flip one at a time. That's fine. Okay. So now I've got them all facing the correct direction. Looks like it. The placement of them is the same. I can start to lay these things out. And we're going to use the same kind of grid that we had before. Right here. I've got, this is exactly what we had before when you guys did your topos. I've made it one that's literally twice the size because that size fits our 3D model perfectly, right? So actually we're going to do a drawing of the same size. We're going to do the drawing, it's going to be, these little sections in your drawing is going to be half the size of your model, right? So what we'll do is we'll just set it up full size and then scale it down when everything's ready just to get scaled down, and we'll do it all in one shot. We'll all treat it as one thing, right? So now that I've got these section tools in my model, I'm going to lay them out. So instead of nesting the layout, which did it all in one shot, we want to do a 2D layout, which lets us drop them individually. That way we can get it to fit our drawing. So I go to 2D layout, and this is in the section tools, and it says select section. So I go to my list, and I want to select all of my sections that I've got. I've got some old ones in here too, so I don't want to use those. I want to start with the 21. Those are my other practice ones. It doesn't let me shift select stuff, so I just have to do it the old-fashioned way, which is fine. I could also go down and just do a crossing box on all my sections, which I would have done if I realized these old guys were in here. So I say OK, and it's going to ask me for my placement point. I'm going to do the grip as the center, and that's the only options I need. We don't need to show solids or anything like that. I'm going to turn on my mid snap, and I'm going to make sure that my smart track is working. I've also got my intersect snap on, and what I'm basically going to do is the top is 1, and then I go across, and across until the bottom right one is going to be 20. And I'm basically centering my sections on every grid right here. So when I ask for a placement point, I look at my 2 mid snaps here and here, and I use that intersection to place the drawing, and it drops the section in there, and then I just rinse and repeat. I mean, I'm basically just dropping them in there, right? Some of them are going to be smaller. Some of them are going to be bigger. Don't worry about it. You just want them centered. So you can see some of them are going to overlap. You just want to make sure that and the way I activate this intersection is I tell Rhino what the 2 mids are, and it uses smart track. So you could use it without this intersect snap, but you have to be a lot more precise, and it'll work. It's just a little more touchy without that intersect snap. As you can see, because I did everything in order, I'm getting everything in order here. So from 1 to 20, in my case, it's 21 to 40. Just making sure this thing overlaps here. I'm not referencing the wrong stuff here. You can see that everything's kind of vertically aligned in here. So it's basically just loading up your cursor with all the sections you have in your model. And you want them kind of centered. The important thing here is that we're centering them vertically. Doesn't matter that this one is taller than this one or anything like that. We're going to fix that easily. And you can see it starts to get narrow as my section cut starts to get kind of extreme down here. And there's not much left here. It's starting to get really tight in there. Okay. So now these are all laid out. I don't really need my annotation dots at this point because I know that 1's at the top left and 20 is at the bottom right. So I'm going to type in SELDOT and pick those. Actually, those are locked. So what I'm going to do is, you can see that I already had all these sections here. And it added the new layout hatch, layout curve, layout solid layers to my existing sections. I'm going to make a new layer that's just called sections, which I have right here. And these have my old ones in it, so I can get rid of those. And I'm going to place my sections into that layer called sections to keep it a little bit more manageable. And with all of these, I'm going to unlock them. So if I have them all selected and I hit the unlock button, it'll unlock them all at the same time instead of me doing it individually. So now they're unlocked. Now my SELDOT should work. That's going to pick them. I don't know why it didn't work on that one, but looks like I missed something on the locking. It's just being touchy. Weird. No objects are locked and no layers are locked.
23.
No. Oh, it's because it wasn't expanded and I missed it. Yep. Watch your layer expansion. Look, it happened on 21 too. Raja is really cautious about her geometry, and she doesn't want you to delete stuff by mistake. She knows too many architect students. So now this stuff is looking pretty good. I've got it in the right spot. You can see that my main issues with it are that some of them are too big, coming out the sides like this, and none of them are lined up at the bottom at all. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to clean up the problem that some of them are too big with these sections here. This, you kind of want to watch your layers here. I've got a layer that's called the drawing double size and the drawing regular. So right now this is the double size drawing that we're talking about, not the regular one. And we've got a borders layer, which are these guys. I'm going to make a copy of these. So I'm going to duplicate layer and objects. I'm going to make a copy, and I'm going to turn the original off, and I'm going to operate on the copy here. I'm going to lock the extents, which is this one. And right now, because of that, this is what I can select is all this stuff. And then I'm going to use the curve Boolean to clean up this stuff here. I'm going to go to curve from objects, and curve edit tools, curve Boolean. It's important here that I say delete input all. I just want to leave behind what I want, and that's why I made that backup copy of my borders, so that way I can kill everything that I don't need in this operation. So I say delete input all, combine regions no, and I select my curves here, and I hit enter. That's puts me in this selection mode. And I'm not even, for me, I'm not going to sit and figure out which ones I need to do it with. I need them all to keep going. So what this will also do is if for some reason this is not a closed polyline, but it's open or it's multiple ones, this will close them up too because it's a Boolean command. So basically I'm just going to click in these regions real quick, and this basically says all this stuff is going to come out as closed regions, and I don't have to care whether or not they actually overlap or not. I'm not going to sit and sift through them. I'm just going to treat everybody the same on this one.
If it's overlapping the boundary line, it's not going to affect that command.
So see how it's overlapping here? It's leaving this part behind.
Right.
Yeah. And if I clicked on it, it would bring it back, but I didn't. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, you can ignore that's a good point. The whole point of this is to purposely ignore this stuff. It's basically cropping all of these at the same time for you. So you only have to do it in one shot. And yeah, exactly. So yeah, make sure you don't click in one of these. That's why I did it kind of zoomed out, so that wasn't an option. So you can see these are kind of lighter gray. That's the ones I want. And I right click, and it just keeps those guys. It looks like I missed one, so I'm going to redo it and make sure I didn't missed it. I think I missed a couple on there.
It's getting like a window of the section.
And it's a toggle, so if you mess up and click this by mistake, just click it again. Okay, looking better. I think I got them. Yep. Okay, so these are all good. I deleted all the stuff that didn't need, and that's why I turned back. So this layer is empty right now, that borders copy layer. I can delete that, and I turn back on my borders layer, and I've got that, right? So at this point, what I want to do is lock that borders layer, and the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to align the bottoms of all these. I'm going to do it by rows. And since these layers are locked, I can just do a bounding box like this and use the transform align tool, our friend, and we're going to do bottom. And it doesn't matter where I go in here now because I'm locked on this axis. So I'm just going to use my end snap right here and pick the corner, and it's going to bring everything down row by row. And since I'm doing an entire row, I only have to do it 5 times. So see bottom. Repeat the command bottom. Pick my new ones. I'm using the bounding box, which is left to right. It's only selecting the stuff that it totally encapsulates. So now these are aligned. right? These are going to vary based on your section cut. That's fine. The important thing here is that they're centered vertically. So we get to see this shift that starts to happen in the site. And now I'm going to take these layers. I'm going to pay attention, like, so right now they're in my sections. I had this kind of sections thing, and there's a lot of information on that. It has my section cuts. It has all this stuff in there. So I'm going to make a new layer that's just called, I'll call them ground cuts to keep it true to our reading. And I'll change my object layer. And what I'll do is I'll move this guy. I'm going to move it from this corner, the bottom left corner, to the other bottom left corner of my drawing that I want to do, and I'm going to scale it. And I'm going to scale it by that same bottom left corner of the drawing. And for my scale factor, I'm going to type 0.5, and they're in there. So these are all closed curves that I can take in an Illustrator and treat. They're all on this one layer, so I can treat them as one thing, right? That drawing, for intents and purposes in Rhino, is a done deal. The other drawing that we do in Rhino is the guide to that, which is this guy right here. So for this one, since we have new topo that you guys made a canyon out of, I need new contours that I'm going to do on it. So I'm going to do a new set of contours on the contours layer that's here in my template. Go to curve from objects and do contours. Objects for contours, I'm just going to slice through our topo polysurfaces, those two, and my base point is, I'm in my perspective view now, and it's easy to just use my end snap here and just go from the bottom up to the top like that. I could also do that in a right view or something like that. The distance, my distance is going to be 0.25. My model's in inches, so that's going to be the same as your contouring that went this way. So now we've got that. That's going to go into our Make 2D drawing. You want to make sure it's on your contours layer. So right now is a good time to check and say, hey, is this thing on the right layer? According to this, it is, but if not, I can change it down there. Our drawing, I can turn that poly surface off for a second, is basically going to be of all our section cuts, these guys, and our contours. And you're going to clean it up a little bit, basically tell us where your sections are, so we know which one's which when we look at this drawing here. This is the same scale going on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Make 2D command, and this is going to flatten these out right now. It's going to flatten it out and kind of clean up the things. So the things that overlap, it's going to clean up a little bit, not enough for us to use, because we're not going to get in there too much with the topo lines, and get it ready to get out of there. We're going to keep our 3D geometry here and have a separate set of 2D geometry here. So I'm going to go to my dimension, my Make 2D, objects to draw, going to have that on. So I've only got my sections and I've got my things. I can take off my perp curves, don't need that layer. That's just going to add extra little curves in there that I don't need. And I hit enter. That's going to bring up the prompt for the command. It's got to think for a second, because those are a lot of contour lines that it has to do. And I probably have too many Rhino models open too. I don't need to worry about hidden lines. I'm going to leave my tangent edges on. I'm going to keep it on my current view, and I want to maintain my source layers. So I hit OK. Very basic. I'm not really doing too much here. It's dropping it. That's my 2D drawing that just dropped there. So you can take a look at that for a second. Right. It looks a lot like we've got just a flattened version of it. A little more easier to deal with in Illustrator, a little less heavier lifting. I'm going to move it from the bottom left corner. So I'm going to use my transform move from the corner here to this kind of bracket that got put there for you. Right there. So this drawing is going to go out. Right now, one artifact that we've got, and what you need to do is to start to clean up where the flags go in it, because right now they're just randomly out there. They overextend themselves perfectly or purposefully in section tools. So what makes for a sloppy drawing, but what we can do with that is to start to clean it up. If I start to look at where these are, I can easily just click on here and start to join them back together. So I'm just hitting Control J and I'm joining it, right? I'm making the good thing right with this is that these will create these closed sections that we can fill in on in Illustrator as well. So these will come in as one kind of curve with a fill on it, which will be good. So how do I clean these up? The best way to do it is to stay in Rhino and take one of these ones and turn on its control points and select these 4 control points down here. And don't use the gumball, because the gumball wants to move in an orthogonal direction. You just take these control points after you select them and drag them down. And the way that you get them to not go somewhere weird is to put the near snap on. The near snap will give you a snap that's on your existing curve. And I would say try to bring these in and start to align them probably as close as you can to, we know you're cutting through the whole section, so we don't need to take it literal and go beyond the bounds. In terms of a drawing, we'll know that you're going through that whole thing. It's more of a graphic thing where we just don't want these things to look like they do right now, like this is a mess right here, right? And by bringing them in, we want to just try to make it. So I'm going to, this one is, you know, down here as well. I turn on the control points, so it's easier to join it, because then once I turn on the control points, I can access it on both sides, and I'm going to bring this one in, and I'm going to use that near snap to bring it into something a little cleaner. So this is probably the biggest drawing part of it. That's you're all going to have random ones. If I hit escape twice, it's back to normal. So I'll do one more of those. This one doesn't need too much work. He's a little shorter. I'm just going to hit Control J, join it together, turn on the control points. You can also hit F10 to do that. And I've got my near snap on down there, and I'm taking it and I'm just dragging it down here. If I got something like this, which is an extra control point, it's looping on itself, I can just delete it. It's just an extra control point. Bringing it in. Oops, forgot my guy out there. All right, so I'm start to clean this up. Something like that.
It has to be inside the border.
You want to keep this border clear, yeah. This border is talking about this area right here in our drawing. So you want to keep that area relatively clear, yeah. So let's say you've done all these. I'm not going to make you sit through 20 of those, but you can see I've already done a 10th of them. It's pretty light lifting. Once it's ready to go out, I want to treat this all as one drawing, you know, because I was kind enough to put the same distance as 6 inches between both drawings in both templates, so we can just treat it as one drawing. We always want to treat it as, whenever possible, you treat it as one drawing because it cuts down our steps. I'm going to export these. As an Illustrator file. So I'm going to call this both drawings 02 and say you wanted to make sure you're doing it from the top view. You want to make sure you keep the scale to be 1 inch equals 1 inch. We're not changing the scale. We say okay. It's written out there. No problem. So I'll go in my Illustrator and open it up. Alright, just take a look at it for a second and take my artboard tool and make it a little bigger. Everything looks like it should look. I'm just going to take a look at the layers. Kind of messy with having all of these. These are basically all our section cuts with the flags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 kind of simpler ones. The ground cuts are good. They're all in one layer. That's nice. The contours are all on one layer. That's good. So I'll just call that contours. there's a section guide layer. That's the drawing itself. That's the boundary for the section, so that's fine. If anything, I can just take that in. That's 2 paths. Yeah, I can take that and put it in other spots, but it really doesn't matter too much. Just bring that stuff along. What I want to do is take all these sections and put them on one layer called section markers or something like that. That's what they are. That's a lot easier to deal with. Makes a lot more sense. I'm going to hit Control A and pick everything, and Control C, copy to my clipboard. But going back to the template, remember you want to have it on your layer manager and take a look and make sure that you've got your paste remembers layers on there. So you don't just drop in a bunch of paths without any layers to them. That's what's going to keep layers on there. And I hit Control V and I paste it in there. All right. Everything's still selected right now. It's a good time to line things up. I'm going to take that same bottom left corner and use the existing stuff that's left there to start to line it up. Everything's still selected, right? Everything's still picked here. So I can go and just start to line it up, take use of the smart guides and stuff like that, get that thing in there. If I hit Control Y, I can go into outline mode and start to tune it and get it lined up and snapped in there like that.
Quick question, what's the shortcut for re-highlighting what was the last thing that you had highlighted?
In Illustrator or in Rhino?
Both.
I don't know Illustrator. Rhino, it's select last. It's going to select your last selection that was highlighted. Well, select last is the newest geometry. Select previous is the previous selection, which in my case are the same thing in that case. So I've got this stuff dropped in because I registered everything at the same time. This is in here, right? And it needs a little bit of love in there, so that I could definitely kind of go and tune that in as I go along. You remember, because I have things on layers here, I can start to really, for instance, I can take a look at my drawings and all my guides and things like that. Like this stuff was already sitting in my labels and my drawing stuff. All that stuff was already sitting in there. So when I select it, I can lock it and move this stuff in to tune it in a little bit and get it in there. And then once I have it in there, I want to go into my drawings and take off some of the redundant stuff. Some of the redundant stuff is in here in the drawing. So when I look at the outlines that were already here in my model, I've got 2 different kinds of them. I've got the ones that came in from Rhino, and I've got the ones that were already sitting there. The ones that came in from Rhino, I'm going to turn off. It's just redundant. And the same thing with the drawing extents. I don't need all that stuff in there. So this template, same deal as before. You're going to have to put your name. Try to figure out that you need to put your name on it this time. Try to remember that you've only got one instructor. It's going to make it really kind of nice to narrow it down to we consider it a large family, but in the end, there's only one person grading you. There, up here, we've got the different types of line weights. It's a simpler drawing than with when we had the peaks and coals. It's not going to be as kind of complicated as it was before. But what we do need to do is take a look at what's happening with our section markers and the numbers that happen here in the section flags. So first things first, I take a look at this drawing. The only real information here that needs to get changed in terms of line weight is the fills, the ground cuts. So I select those, and it says here that the ground fill is a 0.25 stroke of black. So I'm going to change myself up here. I'm already black right there, so I'm going to change it to 0.25 and change my fill. My fill on this one is gray, 50%. So if you hover over there, you're going to see the percentages. You want the K to say 50. And I selected by layer, so everything is done, right? I don't have to go and select them individual or anything like that. The graphic scale is already there. You're not going to edit it. Leave it alone, right? This is at 1/8. I guess we can tell them that, right? Like your model's at 1/4 of the site. Yep.
Please repeat the color part.
You can repeat it when you watch it on YouTube.
So it's on the essentials, right?
Yeah. So that's that layer that is it's written here. It's written in the template. Yeah, it's just going to be written here in the instructions layer for your reference. So don't worry about memorizing it right now. But it's 50% gray, and we've got a 0.5 black stroke, right? Yep. Just remember, you want to pick stuff by the layer. You don't want to pick stuff individually. That's why you want to organize stuff. I never have to go in here and anything. One thing that we did talk about in our group is these kinds of guys, and that I should have done this in Rhino, but you know, when these come up, the best command that we found is the blend curve command for this, because it looks at curve continuity and tries to close it up. So if I go and use the blend curve command, it's under curve, blend curves, do the adjustable blend curve, it'll give you a preview. And I pick the two ends, it treats the ends like separate curves and tries to blend them together. And it says, I'm not going to get into curve continuity right now. You can take Computational Design 1 if you want to get into that kind of stuff, but you can adjust this basically as you walk down the line. The continuity is more and more restrictive, and it cares less about the form and more about the connection of the new curve to the old curve. But we only need the continuity in terms of curvature. We don't need to go to G3 or G4, so we say okay on that. And that'll work for two curves, but it also works for ones like this that were open up like that. So I think mine only has that one little peak. Of course, you want to do that before you bring it into Illustrator. So let's assume I did that and I did it at the right time. Going back to this drawing, so we look at our layers here. This is the same as before. Our contours are going to be at 0.25 in black. So I'm going to change that real quick. That's going to lighten those up. We've got these flags here, these section markers. I locked them. This layer here, and they're going to be looking a little bit better looking. But what we want to do is give them a fill on the flag themselves. So they're a 0.5 stroke of black. So I'm going to change them. They got rescaled along the way here and coming in as a weird size. So I say 0.5 in black. And I'm going to change the fill to be white because I want to be able to put my numbers on top of them. So you can see that those filled out, and you just want to make sure the layering order is correct, because right now I want those things to be above the contours. You can see my contours right now are going over them. So I've got a white fill on these flags, but it's not working because of my layer order. So I just take these section markers and put them up above there. Like that, yeah. So now you can do your homework. You can bring in text if it helps you out. I could have brought in some numbers. Remember, we can do that conversion of dots to numbers, and you could have brought those in. But the font is right here. So if I take a look at this one, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these will be a lot easier to read. We're going to put all our flags on the bottom ones down here. So for instance, if this is my last section, to make it easy, then this is going to be section 20. I'm just going to grab this number and pop it in there like that. I want to keep it, let's see. I want to keep it, again, it's a numbering thing, so I went behind it. So I take my section numbers and I put that at the upmost layer so it doesn't pop behind like that. And I want it readable. I'm not going to rotate it. I just want it to be legible, because some of these angles are pretty extreme, and you're gonna get some serious kind of things. But basically, the finishing point on that is all the numbers on the flags. So now we know where all 20 of your sections are, and your new topo has your rift in it. Take a look at my line work. ground fill, section markers, topo lines. The borders came in the way that they are, but you can always double check those and take a look at your drawings and make sure that your borders are okay just by picking the layer. And sure enough, mine are still 0.5. So it should be okay if you use the border for your drawing that was in it. Just remember this time that you need to print this at 100%. The way to do that is to keep this layer on that says print, actually print the layer that says print, the crop lines, and crop it out and use those to print. And that will get you ready to get it out of there. So remember, when you have two artboards, we've got two artboards right now. Export them both. So we just when we do our export as a PDF, we want to use the option to use the artboards. So we're actually going to do the print on that one and get them up as a 2-page drawing as well. So you're going to have 2 pages in there as well. Just kind of keep that in mind. Skip blank artboard. We don't have any blank artboards, right?
Yeah, save it as range.
You can save it too. If you do the save, that works too with this one. And we don't have actually images in here, so we can do the save the copy one, and we could do a save as PDF and say use artboards. We don't have to do the range because we've only got 2. If you had more than that, you would use the range 1 to 2. But right now they're going to give us the same amount. Right? Yeah.
Good question. So on the topography one, you want to make sure we have all the flags, all the bottom flags pushed into that white boundary?
All of them. They should all fit inside of this barrier.
Top and bottom?
Yep. The numbers go on the bottom.
But inside the white boundary or inside the box of the topo?
See this one that's highlighted
Yeah.
in black? That one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if they're close, we just stagger them a little bit.
If they're really up against each other, yeah, just graphically do the best that you can. Think of it as a graphic exercise, because we're gonna if I was doing this as something I was handing in, I would start to tune this better and fit it in and try to be more even about how far it is here versus how far it is here. Maybe I bring this flag in and be a little bit more symmetrical with the way I draw it. But as a quick kind of demo, you want this to kind of read as a smooth kind of drawing.
What's the size of the paper for that one?
This is 14 by 18. Yeah, it has an 1.5-inch border on it. So you can probably just plot them both out and crop them. Any other questions?
Is this going to be up tonight?
No. Yeah. Yeah, we'll just put a link to the template in the video description. Yep.
So the run has 2 hours. So do I need to have like 20 both, or just one?
One's enough. Yeah. All right, guys. Best of luck. I'm looking forward to seeing them. Yep. Yep.